because we have an engineering marvel coming up for you. This hole in the wall you can see on the left here is the Birkenhead Tunnel. It actually was opened by Queen Elizabeth in 1936. My great auntie was there. She never let me forget it either. And it's an engineering marvel because apart from the fact it took 9 years to actually build it, with 1,700 labourers working on it, some have actually lost their lives during the process. But it's also one of 5 of the longest underwater passenger tunnels in the world to this day. And it only costs £2 to go through. So we have some stunning Grade 1 listed buildings coming up in our museum and gallery quarter. It's also our next stop. And the first of them is on the left here, and it is the World Museum, which is home to our planetarium, our dinosaur and our ancient Egypt exhibitions. Right next door is the very grand central library, where you'll find original Victorian reading rooms alongside a 21st century makeover. And the building at the very end, hidden behind the scaffolding, is the Water Art Gallery. And they have one of the finest Raphaelite art collections in the country. Not to mention a great cafe that does a really good soup and sandwich combo. Very popular. All of these are free to go into, and they're all open today as well. So coming up on the left now, to the front of the bus you can see a column. It's hard to miss really. It's got the Duke of Wellington standing on top of it, and his statue is actually made from cannon shot that was collected during the Battle of Waterloo. So a bit of recycling. And his name's going to crop up a bit later as well. So on the left, another Grade 1 listed building here. This is St George's Hall. This dates back to 1854. It was designed by Robert Cockrell. It's a neoclassical style building, and apparently it's King Charles's favourite building in the world. If you fancy checking out something else that King Charles fancies other than Camilla, that is, she's off limits. You can go and visit it for free. It has the original jail cells in the basement, a beautiful circular Victorian reading room and library, and some stunning mosaic and marble and stained glass work in the ballroom as well. So just on the left-hand side, you'll now see the Hillsborough Memorial. And this is dedicated to 97 football supporters who tragically lost their lives in 1989 watching a game of football. The gardens themselves that are on the left here, St John's Gardens, they're an Italian-style garden with a rather gruesome secret hidden underneath that green grass. But they're actually the site of one of the biggest mass burial grounds in the city. There are up to 30,000 people buried underneath that garden. Many lost their lives tragically during the cholera epidemics and the Black Death as well. As we head up the hill, you can now see Lime Street Station. This opened in 1836, and it was groundbreaking at the time. It actually inspired the design of the Gare du Nord in Paris and Grand Central Station in New York as well. If you look to your left, you can see the other side of St George's Hall now, and you might recognise it as the Town Hall in Gotham City in the Batman movies. And if you're a Harry Potter fan, it also featured in the Fantastic Beasts movie as well. On the left-hand side is the Art Deco Empire Theatre, dating back to 1925. And the Beatles played their last gig in the city there in 1963. Hidden just behind it on the left is Mar Edgerton's pub. It's world famous because it has a wall, celebrity wall of fame, because so many famous people have actually drunk in there, including Frank Sinatra and Judy Garland, and even more mind-blowing, I reckon, Marilyn Monroe as well. Can you imagine she's actually been to Liverpool? and I'm sure she has a champagne cocktail or two. So this area, back in the 19th century, this was quite a busy part of the city because it actually was part of the main shopping centre in the city. And it also featured a fair number of lime kilns as well, which no longer exist. They were used originally to clean the ships that came into the city. So it looks like we've got a bit of gridlock right up here. So it might be before some of your time, this reference, but this road actually featured in the movie Lester Brezhnev as well. In fact, one of the hotels based on here was the hotel that they actually had in the movie itself, which, as you know, was written and directed by a local playwright. Always one, Colin. I know, let me out, I'm not waiting any longer. Now he's going to block us getting out. So as we head up towards the lights, let's all cross our fingers that we're going to get through them. I don't think we are. No, totally gridlocked up there. But the terrace that you can see directly in front of the bus now, that actually dates back to 1810. It's an example of some of our rather fine Georgian architecture that you'll see dotted around the city. And back in the day, it would have been during the heyday of the cotton trade, it would have been one of the hottest postcodes in the city. It's quite hard to imagine really that a terrace like that almost didn't make it into the 21st century. Unfortunately, during the Second World War, it was very heavily bombed and damaged. But our local council didn't really get their act together. They let it go into rack and ruin. And it got to a point where they were actually planning on demolishing it and putting up a car park instead. Fortunately, we had a very stubborn tenant living in number 51, and she decided to set up a campaign to rescue the terrace. And after a number of years of battling with the council, she finally won. And in 1990, a property developer took it over and restored it back to its former glory. Yay! We made it. So the terrace itself looks out onto the back of Lime Street Station, as you can see on the right hand side here. If anyone wants to go up at Lime Street Station, let me know, because otherwise we're going to give it a miss, because the traffic's pretty bad down there as well. The station itself, apart from being groundbreaking and the first successful passenger terminus in the world, is also famous for a slightly less, how can I say it, salubrious reason. Because it's the site of the first ever railway passenger fatality in the world as well. And unfortunately, that took place during the opening ceremony in 1836. We actually had a local MP, his name was Sir William Huskisson, and he was a bit of a rail enthusiast. And as you can imagine, they're all gathered there for the opening ceremony. The Stephenson's rocket is travelling into the station, and he decides to step onto the tracks. And he was run over and killed. Quite tragic, you might think, but wait till you hear the rest of the story. He was actually crossing the tracks to shake the hands of his arch rival, the Duke of Wellington, Senator Coppock again, and they were all involved in a rather sordid love triangle at the time. It didn't work out too well for Sir William Huskisson, that's for sure. Can you imagine his poor wife getting the news? Your husband's been run over and killed by a train, and he's been cheating on you. So let's just hope you have life insurance, just to line there, a little bit of a silver lining for her. And it does beg the question, really, do MPs get any smarter and wiser as the decades go by? Not the brightest thing to do, is it really? Step on the track. So the area, as I said, it has had its fair share of scandal and drama, because in the 19th century, this was also our main red light district as well in the city. So I'm sure none of you looking at you all look quite respectful. You wouldn't be seen dead hanging out down there. And we had a well-known young lady who worked here successfully. Her name was Maggie May. And she was so good at her job, I reckon we would have nominated her as a Business Woman of the Year. But unfortunately, the British government just shipped her off to the colonies instead. And she was never heard of again. But she was immortalised by the Beatles, rather cheaply, I have to say, on their album Let It Be. And Rod Stewart wrote a song about her as well, which is a little bit more flattering. So you might be able to see, if you bend down, I can see him now, directly in front of us, halfway up the Lewis's building, we have a rather cheeky naked man statue. And his name is Liverpool Surgeon. Here, I'll move out so you can see. There you go. And we call him locally Dickie Lewis. Dickley, yeah. Well, that's another story altogether, Colin. I'll tell you that another time. But yeah, Dickie Lewis. And again, an opening ceremony with a bit of a dramatic twist, because they realised that there was a bit of a design